Today's episode of In the Groove is brought to you by the Port of Spain T-shirt company. Hello folks, welcome to another episode of In the Groove. I'm Terry Smith and today we have an extra special guest. I have Robert Young. He has been described as the Pablo Picasso of fashion. Say it again, say it again. The Pablo Picasso of fashion. Picasso! Not making that up, folks. But before we get to that, I'd just like to inform those who wanted to know about the bags. They're on their way, almost ready. I'll give you a sneak peek. I just picked them up today, the prototypes. They're looking good. Peek. And if you're going to tighten your belt this year, make sure the belt has style. Are you middle class or are you raised poor? Anyways, over to In the Groove, Robert Young.
Your thinking, your aspiration, where you line, you might, how you see the world, how you perceive of it, your
people are perceived to be middle class. I actually define myself as raised poor. I use it because I will have patterns of behavior that could be. I see most children as raised poor, right? And the parameters I use that to guide that is by how you're brought up, who brought you up. My parents were poor. So I will have their patterns, their behavior, how to respond around money and things around organization, my struggles around that. It's getting too little personal, but anyway. So race poor. It feels, if in a global sense of access to resources and things, I can be middle class.
Your values, your upbringing, you were brought up in middle class values. You also have an access to both worlds.
Right.
Because you can still go to any of these upper places and still go to the forest.
I never feel that I have access to those places. I never feel. And many a time I've been turned away from getting into the spaces that perceived to be middle class. I've been turned away from coconuts, from Attic, from the club down in South, that one that Johnny's owned. Yeah, been turned away, but wearing my own clothes, things I myself at $1,000, put it in my pants and is a jacket.
Right.
But the thing is, identity is determined by the person who carries it, to name it. So you might perceive me to be middle class. I see myself from my understanding of my patterns and how I was brought up and my struggles at my home and about lights getting cut and growing up as a single parent and having gas run out and having a stove that catches a fire and that the mother will have to fix herself because she doesn't have resources and cook outside in the yard on a stone, and that would happen not for one day. I see my experience as a raised poor experience.
But at this point,
yeah.
Robert,
and you could in this place where mass happens, you could be perceived to be right of certain categories, and people move, and upward mobility is part of our experience. So people shift, right? According to where I go with people, possibly how I speak or the perception of being a designer, I may be middle class. If I go around middle class people, with that a lot of resource, I may be perceived to be other than them, because skin color shit here, right? School, living in the East, little things like that. Because my experience, people say, what school you went to? I always ask someone these Thomas schools. I went to Career Junior Sec. I went to Seneca Senior Comprehensive. I went to Tuku Composite. I rode a bicycle to school in Toko, 6 miles a day. I took bus from Kirep to Toko. So the time when I fell with my father, right? And sometimes have to travel with coins. So the experience, my personal experience of a single mother, because at 44, she would have already had 4 children already. One about 6 years old. I can't see myself doing that, and seeing my mother operate now and how she could deal with certain things and how she can't deal with certain things, I could, yeah. Anyway, full stop.
Robert, why did, and it's a strange thing, but you see it, we see it all the time. But why did this ease with the label of middle class?
Because, well, I want to say about pretense, right? And this must be a pretending of me. But there is a difficulty. Every time I describe myself to anybody that I am raised poor, there is a discomfort in the acceptance of my definition. People have actually gotten angry. Middle class people are working class people who have the jobs to make sure the working class people stay in line. Because they just as close enough. Because we have few working class people in Trinidad. Or what we call upper class. I can't break it down to access. Right? Working class controls things, they don't know how much money they have. Whereas middle class people are people who are working class but have a different definition so they can feel a little better. Pretend that they're not raised poor or working class, so they can take on the job of doing the job for the older class. They're targeted mostly for blaming things. They're the ones that have the society in disorder. They're the ones that are not doing their work, but they're just struggling hard to stay away from not having a job. Yeah? From staying away from not being defined as unemployed or working class.
No, I'm going to get to a question here, but class operates here very well. Class in Trinidad is very, to the extent that we've been having this discussion here for a long time.
Because we have a discussion.
So let me finish now.
Yeah.
But socioeconomically, even as a marketing target, I would not pull Robert and say Robert is the fella if we're looking for working class or somewhere sub or not middle class.
Right.
I wouldn't pull you out and say, look there.
Right, okay, of course.
So,
I would be identified as.
So, right. But what I want to get to now is that you're a designer, you're a male designer in an industry that would locally have all kinds of issues that they've assimilated around that.
Yeah.
Right. How, and the assimilation around that might vary from class to class, but tell me about your experience with that.
I often describe myself as an artist making a choice to work with clothing. Right? So I have a strong political, personal, anti-incorporation, trying to uncolonize my mind, trying to uncolonize the space by doing the clothes or how I do my clothes, right? So I remember one time I was doing a show window doctor for this period when Salvatore was up in the 80s. And it could have been early nowadays or the end of the PNM. 1 and 2, and we got access to the window. You pay like $200 a month to put up something. Somebody's knocking the glass. Talk, you're a designer. And all designers were man. So my definition from that space, I just do clothes, I just make clothes as an artist. Right?